Hi, everybody. My name is Brett Lykins. I'm a managing consultant at Network to Code. We're a consultant firm that focuses on bringing automation and DevOps principles into network operations to help enterprises transform the way they operate their network. Today, I appreciate you taking time to be with us. We're going to talk about a Python project called Nornir. So, what is Nornir? We're going to cover a little bit of that. What would you compare Nornir to in the marketplace? Compare and contrast it to some other alternative tools. Dive into some of the internals and the concepts of how you use Nornir, and then talk a little bit about some example use cases. So first, what is Nornir? So Nornir is a Python automation framework that allows you to take an inventory of hosts and do tasks on those hosts. So hosts on the network, servers, routers and switches, things like that. It's extremely extensible and plugin based. And it's agentless. There's no agent you have to install on the box. You're running it all from whatever source machine you wish to execute tasks on the remote hosts. It's a fairly recent project, started in December of 2017. Current release just came out is Nornir 3.0, and we'll talk a little bit about some changes that happened between 3 and 2, because there's some still documentation out in the community and things like that is still referencing Nornir 2, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Up to 668 stars, go give it a star. And if you want to contribute, we're always looking for more help there, so definitely check it out. So one of the things that comes up all the time here is, what about Ansible? Is an Ansible a Python-based automation tool? And it is, but Nornir isn't Ansible. Nornir ain't Ansible. So the key differentiator for me is that there's no domain-specific language when you're using Nornir. You're not required to keep your logic in YAML files or anything like that. It's all Python. So whatever the logic you want to write into your program, you're writing it in Python. You have access to your debuggers, your IDEs, everything like that to work on it as Python, which is really powerful to me when you start talking about actually doing something at scale with a lot of different operating systems, different complicated tasks and workflows. Having control of that in Python in a programming language is extremely powerful. So it's not to say that Ansible, you should never use Ansible or anything like that. Ansible has a place. And one of the key differentiators for Ansible is that it has a much lower barrier to entry if you don't have the Python skills, or say you're in an organization where there is already usage of Ansible. Your server team is operating with Ansible. It's easy to do it for other projects as well. In addition, Ansible has some backing of a project called Tower, or AWX, where it allows you to orchestrate these playbooks that Ansible wants to run against your devices. And Nornir doesn't have something like that. You kind of have to build your own execution engine. And so Ansible has that sort of lower barrier to entry because its batteries included in that way. Now, also, there's a plethora of automation frameworks and tools on the market today. Where Nornir stands out is it's initially was built to focus on network devices, routers, switches, firewalls, load balancers, etc. And so the founders of that project came out of the network automation community online. And it sort of sought to fill out some of the gaps that you see in existing tools. Ansible recently has gotten better, but for a long time had very lackluster network device support. And Salt and other tools like that required you to either install an agent on the device, which doesn't work for many network operating systems, or have a proxy agent or things like that. And so there was hurdles to get through with some of those other tools. So with Nornir, you have that native Python tooling framework. You can easily extend it with plugins, and it's first-class support for network devices. It's not as large of a community as something like Ansible, but it's definitely growing. There's a large number of us invested in it, and it's less batteries included out the box. You do have to have some Python knowledge because it is a Python automation framework. So why would you want to go over some of those cons? What are the things you would want to get out of it? Well, one of the key benefits is it's extremely easy to integrate with existing Python frameworks. So if you have some sort of web-based Flask app already and you want to have it go touch a network device and pull some commands back, you can do that. It integrate right into Flask, use Nornir to do the task on the device and return results. One of the common things I've seen lately is with a tool called Netbox, which is a open source DCIM tool for keeping track of your network infrastructure and your servers and things like that, and your DCs. It integrates to the plugin architecture on that platform, and you can use Nornir as a plugin to go out and retrieve information about the devices that are kept in Netbox as a source of truth. So when I get to this point, a lot of times people, speed, yay, speed isn't necessarily everything. For example, if you're doing backups of all your network devices, it doesn't matter how fast that occurs sometimes, as long as maybe it occurs within 24 hours, because you just need daily diffs. So it can take 4 hours to run the backups of all your devices. That doesn't matter. For something, speed is more important than others. Nornir is extremely fast compared to Ansible. And so put a link in here, and it'll be in the slides when we provide those out. But essentially, there's a massive speed increase, orders of magnitude faster than Ansible for similar network device connection tasks. So what makes it like this? How do you do this? So let's dive into it. So one of the key things to call out first, and I mentioned a little bit earlier, is Nornir 3.0 was recently released. And so some of the documentation and things like that might still be getting updated. Happened just a few weeks back. But the key differentiator to notice is plugins are no longer included in the package of Nornir, which is beneficial because you no longer are installing this massive set of plugins for you maybe only want one of them. So you can directly install, pip install Nornir, and then whatever plugin you are trying to use, the NetMiko plugin, the general utilities. And there's a listing online of all the community available plugins that you can choose from to install or make your own. And we'll cover that a little bit further on. So if you have been using Nornir before, or if you've come onto an example that somebody put online, a couple months ago and it's written for 2, there's some official documentation to tell you how to get from 2 to 3, as well as Kirk Byers, one of the maintainers of the project, is put out a sort of operational guide to, if you're using 2, here are some places you'll need to go change things in your existing code to make it work with 3. It's not a complicated migration. Mainly it's because the plugins are external. There's some name spacing changes, and you'll just need to modify those in your code, but nothing extreme. So, the good stuff. It's an inventory with hosts, groups, and a default setting. No matter what your plugin or where your inventory lives, it's built out of those components. And there are tasks, which are the things you want to do to your inventory. So you have your inventory of hosts and the tasks you want to do to them. Tasks are really just Python functions, and there's some extra wrappers around it that Nornir provides to give you the thread handling and things like that are built into the way these tasks are executed. And then runners. So you have inventory of the hosts that you want to do things to, tasks, the things you want to do to them, and runners kind of puts that together. Runners actually do the task on the host. Now there's a couple built in. Right out of the box, you can run it serially through the hosts in your inventory, or you can use threads. And so because a lot of these tasks are network IO bound, where you're going out and you're waiting on a response, things like that, threads work really well for that and do scale fairly well. If you choose to do something else, you want to try to do some async plugins for it, or spawn processes, whatever, you can actually create your own runner. These are just the ones that are provided out of the box. It'll be serially execution or threaded. Now, when we talk about the inventory, you have a plugin to tell you what kind of inventory. Most common one you see for testing things like that, and we'll talk about it a little bit, is a YAML-based inventory. It used to be called simple inventory. You'll still see that referenced in the documentation, things like that. Ansible inventories, you have an existing Ansible inventory, you can use that with this tool. Or if you're using something like Netbox as a DCIM that has all of your infrastructure in it, you can use that as an inventory source as well. Write your own. So you're not using one of these other things, you're using a custom homegrown CMDB, whatever, you can write a plugin to read that inventory and use it with Nornir. Some, like I said, some of the documentation is still a little bit lagging because the 3.0 release just came out, but the API for generating custom inventory plugins is the same, so I linked a little bit older documentation there. So YAML inventory is really what you see for testing things out. I'm going to use in this example. And for if you have less than, say, 5,000 hosts, go for it. It doesn't really cause you any problems. If you have an existing other source of truth, you want to integrate with it. But if you're just testing this out, use it. It's just a hosts.yaml and groups.yaml files that contain attributes about your inventory. The example hosts one here, you have a host name, the password, what group it's a member of, any arbitrary data you wish to hang off of it there. The group file, much the same. The group name, any attributes about the devices that are members of that group, and in addition, any other arbitrary data you wish to maintain about that, a device location, what's the vendor, things like that, other things that you care about that device. So when we get into it now, tasks are, again, the functions, the Python functions you're going to execute against each host. Pardon me, sorry. And so examples, tasks can be really simple. In this case, I'm just going to, for each host, print out that I'm doing stuff to that host. I'm doing stuff to the host. So it's a very simple task. The only thing that makes a Python function into a Nornir task is it accepts as the first argument a Nornir task object. You can put tasks inside of each other. You can have subtasks. Usually I don't recommend that from the start because processing results can get a little bit complicated when they're nested, but you can certainly do that. You are more than welcome to use any of the broadly available community plugins. There's a link here again to nornir.tech for the plugins page that lists out the community available tasks and plugins. There's a lot out there, example, text file manipulation, local file operations, things like that. For example, one of the common ones, again, because I'm focused a lot on the network devices, is using the NetMiko plugin. Nornir-NetMiko, you want to use that one, pip install Nornir-NetMiko, and you have access to these where you can send a command to a network device or send config. Same for Napalm, another common network automation tool. Install its plugin, Nornir-Napalm, and you can use the Napalm get task to do things to your devices. You have your inventory, you have your tasks. What do? You need to initialize the Nornir object. So when you create your initial script, your initial program, you're going to bring in the init Nornir function, which is essentially plums up the connection of your inventory, how you want to run tasks on it, all that good stuff. And allows you to filter it as well, which we'll cover in just a moment. For the configuration of it, when you're doing the initialization, you can either provide a YAML file of the configuration or pass it as parameters to init Nornir. And it's 6 of one, half dozen of another. Kinds of things you would care about telling it about. You obviously need to tell it how to get to your inventory, what kind of plugin you're using. Do you want to be threaded or serial? How are you going to do these things? You plumb that up in the initialization here, either in your config file or arguments. So here's an example configuration file. You can see you define your runner, tell what kind of logging you want to do, what inventory plugin is, where do you get it, all that good stuff. You also, then once you have that configuration file, you tell init Nornir where that file is. It reads all the options from there. You can do both. Tell it where the config file is, but I want to override the number of workers. I don't want 100 workers, I want 10. You can override that at runtime just by telling it the arguments. So once you have your instantiated inventory, so I've created a Nornir object as shown here. So we have my Nornir instantiated. I can filter the inventory hosts. I don't want to run every single task on every single host all the time. Say I only want to do something to my Cisco devices that are not co-located in some other data center. I can filter on these arbitrary data values that I have listed in my inventory. And so I tell it I only want the vendor where it equals Cisco and is colo to false. And so these are arbitrary data values that I can put on those hosts to use for these filtering. In addition, now, you can also pass a function in. Rather than just filtering on the attributes directly, you can get some more advanced logic in here and just have a function that returns true. If every host that you pass through it meets some criteria, you return true for that. So essentially allows you to do a more complex filtering than just attributes, but you can also do that with, they have f-object filtering, which if you're familiar with Django, it's very similar to the way it's used in that as well. I'm not going to cover that here because it could be its own entire thing, but the docs have really good examples on that, and I definitely recommend checking that out. For anything we go over today, I know I'm moving a little quickly. If you have questions, I'm answering live during the video, and you're welcome to reach out to me on Twitter or anything like that, and the Nornir docs are also very good. Just want to make sure I call that out. So we have our tasks. We want to execute the tasks on the host. What do? Well, we defined our runner in the initialization, so Nornir knows how it's going to do these things. We just call .run on our instantiated Nornir object and tell it what task to run. So we have instantiated a Nornir object with an inventory. We've told that Nornir object how to run the tasks. Now .run tells it what tasks to run. And you can, again, list them. .run this task, .run task B, .run task C. Or you can nest them inside of one parent task. Again, it just depends on how you want to generate your code. But when it's done with .run, it gives you back a results object, which is basically a dict with some special attributes like success and fail, change, true, false, things like that. Here's an example, kind of ties all this together. So if I look at, from Nornir import init Nornir, so I've got my instantiator, I can init with the config file. I define a simple task of doing stuff to this host, and then I do .run of that task, and it's going to do it on my inventory and print out doing stuff to labhost.test, which was the host name of the host in my inventory. Really simple to get going, but very powerful in the way that it's built modularly and you can extend each one of these components. So in the end, you have an inventory of hosts where there are host data or group data, and you have a default group as well that kind of you can apply attributes to everything in your inventory unless it's overridden at the higher level, like group or host. You have tasks that you want to do to or on those hosts. And again, linked a couple times, there's a community listing of all kinds of available tasks and plugins already, or if one of those don't suit your need, it's easy to make one yourself. Then you have a runner to put the rubber to the road and actually run the task on the host. You need to create a configuration file to tell it what you want to do exactly, how to find the inventory, how many threads to use if you're using the threaded runner, things like that, how to log. And then you instantiate your Nornir and do.run. So that's it for our internals. And we'll talk a couple of use cases really quickly, and then we'll wrap up. So where would you go into your toolbox and pull this out? So here's an example scenario. You have a large company, Company X. It's bought Company Y. Now, Company X, really good at network automation. It's their bread and butter. They have tens of thousands of devices out there. They have Flask-based APIs. They can different web services serving out information about those devices, reporting changes, all kinds of things. Company Y, not as much. Now, the problems that you have is the existing tooling at Company X, while it's good, is not at all compatible with the Company Y. Many different reasons that can be. A lot of times it's different authentication, different inventory systems, and so there's work involved to marry those two things up. However, in a lot of cases in these kind of scenarios, your existing security auditors and compliance auditors and leadership from the Company X wants the same kind of reports and experience and the customer experience you're providing from Company Y. And in a lot of cases, you have to do these things quickly and without going out and purchasing additional resources. So Nornir, in this instance, was able to use to create a simple YAML inventory of the devices out of the customer Y CMDB, use the existing Python applications and Flask APIs that were existent in Company X, just add a new view that uses Nornir to go talk to these other devices, and was able to get it out the door in just about a week because it's this Python framework. You can snap into these existing tool sets if you have them available, which is very powerful. Now, another common example we'll see is you have a tool like Netbox, which is a Django-based DCIM tool, which is DCIM is data center inventory management, and it's all your network devices are in that tool. Well, in this case, Company D, they had Netbox installed, and they said, what next? What do I do with this now that I got this? I've got the information in there. We're using it manually. How can we, get some things moving now? Automate it. And so one of the things they wanted to do quickly for testing was point a tool at Netbox, use it as the inventory source, and go out to the network. However, there's a 6-week lead time on them getting additional VMs or load balancer infrastructure, and they weren't really a Python skilled shop yet. They were trying to upskill, get those skills. So what they did was they used the existing Netbox VM and associated infrastructure, and they deployed on that Django app a plugin to actually use Nornir, uses Django RQ to queue up jobs, and go out and run those tasks. And so because they were able to build on that existing framework and integrate Nornir directly into it, rather than calling out to some totally different tool, needing to learn Ansible as well. They already were learning Python, so they just kept learning Python, and it really simplified their deployment. And they got from their POC out to production in around a month. So very powerful if you really have some of those tools available to you, or you're already trying to gain that Python knowledge. Nornir is very helpful there. So all that said, how do you get your hands on this now? I've piqued your interest. What do you want to do? It's on GitHub. You can go out there, take a look if you want to give it a star, contribute, whatever. So pip install Nornir is all you have to do to get the base install. Now, again, as a 3.0, you'll need to install some additional plugins, which I link here, the specific available community plugins that are registered. If you write your own and it's something that you think other people would use, more than welcome to contribute it to the community listing there as well, so that everybody can take advantage of that. That's one of the great things about the way this project's been building. So you want to learn more, the docs, again, really great. Go to nornir.readthedocs.io or just Google Nornir docs. It's like the first result there. So we at Network to Code sponsor a community Slack instance, and there's a Nornir channel on there that's very active. The community developers work out of there. Lots of good question and answer. However, if you want some good, a lot of times you come into Slack. Slack's a little ephemeral. People have a hard time with search back, things like that. We recommend the discourse page, nornir.discourse.group, for some of that persistent. A lot of the common questions that you may think of running into, people were asked and answered on discourse. I definitely recommend checking that out. In summary, when you talk about Nornir, it's a Python automation framework. It's really easy to integrate with other tools and frameworks. It's very fast in the way it's structured, and it's easily extensible. It's built around this plugin modular framework where you can adjust your runners, adjust your inventory, adjust your tasks. It's all very extensible, yet a lot of the complexity is abstracted away behind the scenes by things like the task object and returning a standard results object, things like that. It treats network devices as first-class citizens, where in a lot of automation frameworks and tools, that's not the case. And so there are native plugins in the community already for many network-oriented tasks, pushing a command, pulling a config, things like that. And there's a very active community. It's growing. I definitely recommend, again, put that plugin there to check it out, but definitely growing. And there's different, seems like there's always somebody solving a problem with it. There's a new tool or a new plugin almost weekly. So again, I thank you for taking the time to check out our video here. Enjoy the rest of your sessions here at PyTexas. Again, my name is Brett Lykins. I'm a managing consultant at Network to Code, and you can reach out to me on Twitter at LykinsB, on GitHub, LykinsBD, or come to the networktocode.slack.com instance and check it out. I'll be there. All right. Thank you all very much. I hope you have a good day. Thank you.